As a really big Resident Evil fan, an 8-episode TV show would surely be nothing short of awesome. Right? Right? Hi guys, so before we get into it, a quick notification that you'll find all my other Resident Evil reviews in my Resident Evil playlist. I've reviewed all the movies, all the animated movies. I've done rankings for all the movies together. In terms of spoilers, there probably will be some spoilers today, so I'll give you a fair warning about that, but I will at least try and dilute what I'm saying. I'll at least make some effort to not give stuff away pointlessly, but certainly you are at risk a little bit. So I've watched the entirety of this show over the past week. I think I watched it over the course of 4 nights, roughly 2 episodes a night. So I don't think that quite qualifies as binging, but I did watch it quite quick. I wasn't following what this show was going to be about. I knew it wasn't going to be a traditional Resident Evil retelling of the whole Spencer Mansion thing and then the apocalypse in Raccoon City, the Nemesis, that kind of stuff. Had I known what they were actually planning to do, though, I think I probably would have left it a lot longer to watch this, because honestly, when I got into the first episode of this, I couldn't believe the storyline that they were going for. So this is set in 2022, but that's not the present day in Resident Evil land. Present day is basically 1998, and everything that happens after that is you're going further and further into the future. By the time you get to 2022, in Resident Evil mythology, you are far, far on. So we begin in 2022 and the world is starting to rebuild itself. There's a new Raccoon City being built over the old one, but we know that, the virus will get out again and there'll be zombies and monsters. Now, if this was what they were going for, then I might have just thought, okay, I can live with that and just try and get on with enjoying it. But it's not the only timeline in play here. There's also a secondary timeline that takes place in 2036, where there's this post-apocalyptic world where everything's gone to shit. So we have to follow these dual passages of time together. And honestly, whoever came up with this idea just needs feeding to a liquor, because it really doesn't work at all for me. I was in a bad mood for the first 20-30 minutes of episode 1 once I realised what was going on. I did get into the show sort of episodes 2, 3, 4, but coming into the second half of it, my interest started to wane again, and honestly, I was really treading water towards the end of this, sadly. They tried to do this whole thing that Westworld did. So one of the best seasons of TV I've ever seen was Westworld season 1. There was certain situations in that show that were taking place in different timelines, but you didn't actually realise it for the longest time. The storytelling was really organic, and there were reveals eventually throughout the season that felt really clever, because you just didn't know that was going to happen. But the Resident Evil TV show just sets its stall out from the very first minute. It's like, yeah, we've got this timeline, that's where you stand, have fun with it. But running these two stories side by side, 15 years apart, it's just not a very satisfying form of storytelling to me. Westworld got away with it because it was so cleverly structured and well thought out, and the reveals of timelines at certain moments, they just took you by surprise, and they were really special moments in that show when they happened, but this show just doesn't have that same ingenuity. You know what this season of TV feels like? It feels like a season 8 of a TV show. It feels like we've already had loads of seasons of this in the past, but all the big characters like Leon and Jill and Claire, all the actors playing those parts left at the end of 5 seasons or something because their contracts ran out and they had to go off and do Hollywood movies and stuff. So now we've reached season 8 and we've brought new characters in, and the makers are desperately trying to string the show along as long as they can, and there's a new showrunner who's come up with this 2 timeline thing, and it's all getting a little bit desperate. That's what this feels like, but it's not a season 8, it's a season 1. Really bizarre. I struggle to think that there'll be a season 2 though, because, well, firstly, Netflix, they have a reputation for cancelling shows very, very early on in their lifespan, and also the fan reaction to this Resident Evil show has not been very strong at all. You know what, let's talk about some of the positives just for a short amount of time anyway. just for a bit of balance. This show isn't completely and utterly terrible. If it had been, I probably would have turned it off after a couple of episodes and thought to myself, well, I don't have to review this. It's not like anybody's going to notice if I don't. So if we just leave the storyline and the timelines to one side for a moment, all the stuff that gives you a headache basically, there are some really good action set pieces in this which you can just enjoy as their own thing. You know, there are some good parts in this show. It's just that the sum of the parts just doesn't work. A lot of the best stuff involves giant creatures. So there's this one set piece with like this huge caterpillar that comes up out of the ground. There's this other part where there's like a giant spider in this underground lair, which I thought that was the best part of the whole 8 episodes actually. There's this other bit with this giant crocodile going over these moorlands. And there's also a sequence involving lickers. Now, I thought they did a really good job with the lickers in this. A much better job, actually, than the film Welcome to Raccoon City, although I must stress, overall, I still prefer that movie to this TV show. There are also a really good couple of acting performances, so I'm talking now specifically about the 2022 storyline. It'll be no surprise to anybody to learn that Lance Reddick is one of the 2 performances I want to mention. An actor who has definitely been gaining in prominence over the last few years. He's got a really authoritative voice and presence in anything he does, and I think he does a reasonable job of playing Wesker in this. It doesn't bother me that he's black. I do think it's a little bit of a shame that he's playing a clone of Wesker and not the proper version. I think it could have been fascinating to see the actual Wesker suddenly having kids, and will that allow him to be able to change as a character? But unfortunately, we don't go there. There's also this actress in this called Paula Nunes who plays a villainess called Evelyn. Now, I thought this character was absolutely superb, and whenever she was on screen, I was having a good time. Really good character. I don't think they quite knew what to do with her towards the end of the show. You know, you can tell that they get into a situation with this Evelyn character where they're not sure whether to give her the satisfying death that she deserves or whether to keep her around for future seasons. And I won't let you know what her fate is ultimately. She's got this really toothy kind of Joker grin where you see lots of teeth, and reminds me of the actress Katie Sackhoff from Halloween Resurrection and The Flash. But an absolutely top-notch performance. Not so good, probably the 2 leads, the 2 sisters, for whom this whole show is mainly set around, acting-wise, character-wise. I just thought that they were kind of average, really. And by the time the adult Billy turns up towards the end of this, we're very much into full Paul W. Anderson cheese, a realisation you will either welcome or not. There's one great moment towards the end of the 8 episodes where the main protagonist, whose name I can't remember, she goes into this tent run by Umbrella and the light comes on and Evelyn's in there. And Evelyn just starts doing this wacky dance to this tune, and it's the funniest moment in the entire season. But it turns out that Evelyn's being mind controlled in that moment by another villain. But I thought to myself later that night, they could have done this with Evelyn just acting out of free will, because doing this silly dance, it's something that would actually be in her character, just to sort of mock the protagonist who comes in and suddenly she's caught. So again, just one of these little things about this show which I would change, and there were many such moments. I will say the 2022 section is definitely the weakest of the 2 timelines, and that's despite the presence in it of Wesker and Evelyn. This whole part of the show is just really flat. Nothing really seems to happen. Somehow at the end of the 8 episodes we end up with like a Mexican standoff in the Umbrella building, but I only watched this like a week ago. I'm already struggling to remember how we got from A to B, how we got to that little part at the end. There's this whole teen community thing going on and everything gets very emo and Twilight-ish, but I just couldn't get engrossed in the various relationships that were developing, the various cliques and stuff. There's this really irritating subplot involving Billy, one of the 2 main sisters. So she gets bitten by a zombie dog fairly early on, and you think she's going to turn, and you think that that is what's going to give the other sister the motivation to become the Ellen Ripley type badass that she ends up being in the 2036 apocalypse timeline. But then Billy just doesn't turn for like the longest time. You can see her developing zombie traits. Her skin's going a bit funny and her eyes are bloodshot, and you know, she's developing like zombie strength, and you think, okay, any moment now she's going to turn. And then we end up in another episode and she still hasn't turned, and then another episode after that, and it's like, come on, for God's sake, just turn. This is getting irritating now. I won't ultimately reveal what happens with this, but it's just so frustrating to watch. We get so many little embraces between the two sisters because they're getting emotional because they think Billy's going to turn any moment, and then it just doesn't happen, and then we rinse, repeat, and we're in the same situation. The next episode, the only parts of the 2022 storyline I enjoyed were any scene involving Evelyn. Apart from that, though, for me, this section's just a dead loss. The 2036 storyline in the post-apocalyptic world, much better. Now, you can just enjoy that as like a big long string of action sequences as the main sister tries to get from England to France and then to this ship. If they'd have just focused on that, they could have cut it down from like 8 episodes to 6, maybe even to 4, and I would have enjoyed this whole thing a lot more. What I think they should have done, though, and I'm not the first person to say this, I've only watched one review on YouTube of this TV show, and this guy I was watching on his channel, he said exactly the same thing that I'm going to say now. Why the hell didn't they just adapt the source material properly instead of coming up with this weird bit of fan fiction that nobody wants? Because nobody's adapted the games properly yet, you know. They tried to do it sort of with the recent Welcome to Raccoon City film, but they rushed that. They did like, what, 3 games in the one movie they covered. And you just couldn't enjoy all the lore properly. They were just speeding through it too fast. You can't say that Paul W. Anderson adapted the games. The first Resident Evil film he did was already straying way off the source material. I don't think it's been done properly yet, and I think it does need to be done at some point, whether in a collection of movies or a TV show. The TV show might be the way to go. You know, when I think of what my fantasy Resident Evil show would look like in my head, you know, just have season 1 being an adaptation of Resident Evil 0, focus on Rebecca Chambers. Season 2 at the Spencer Mansion. You could have Rebecca sort of being part of season 2, but then we're sort of passing on the baton to Jill and Chris Redfield, and then maybe season 3 could be in Raccoon City with the Nemesis. Season 4, Code Veronica, the Ashford twins. Now, eventually you would get to a point where the main actors would want to leave the show. It happens in every show, but then you could just start focusing on the more singular episodes, like Resident Evil Biohazard with the whole New Orleans thing. That would make a great season of TV just on its own. Maybe even Resident Evil Village. I think you could get like 10, 11 seasons out of all the games, and you wouldn't even need to have the same actors all the way through. That's the beauty of it. So why nobody's tried to attempt it yet, I don't know. For me, it would have been a much more obvious thing to do than this TV show, but there you go. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this. 1, 2 bloody axes out of 5. That's all it's getting, I'm afraid. I will probably never watch this show again. They may do an episode, a season 2. If they do, I will watch it, and who knows, maybe that will improve things, though I suspect that they will just carry on doing the dual timeline thing. Ugh. If you're a big fan of Resident Evil like me, you might as well at least watch this show just to satisfy yourself that you're not missing out on something good, you know. But I wouldn't really recommend it if you're not into Resident Evil. If you've got Netflix already, then I suppose watching it is not going to cost you anything extra. But there we have it. Right, that's all for today. I will leave it there. I'll be back soon with another review. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.